A glimpse at the world proves that horror is nothing more than reality. Alfred Hitchcock said that. And while the bulk of his films are not exactly horror movies, he did give us one movie that would change the genre and movies in general forever. A film that would push the boundaries of what was acceptable for American audiences in 1960 and beyond. Hitchcock was born in Leytonstone, Essex, England in 1899. When he was 16, he fell in love with the cinema. He would spend his pay from his first job on movie tickets and trade journals. He was completely enthralled with the act as well as the business of filmmaking, and by the time he was 20, he had gotten his foot in the door. He was a brilliant artist, so he got a job drawing sets.
10 minutes
In
till
1924,
cycle
Hitchcock
time,
was hired for a
ladies and
project
gentlemen.
being filmed in Berlin, and he was wearing many hats on this production. Under each different hat, his work was solid. Solid enough to get some folks at Amelka Studios to take notice, and it was Amelka that would give Alfred Hitchcock his first paycheck as a director. They hired him to do 2 films, the first of which was called The Pleasure Garden. And as near as I can tell, it was a love story about a dancer who falls in love with 2 guys at the same time. So yeah, the man who would soon earn the title Master of Suspense began his career with a German rom-com about chorus girls. And as near as I can tell anyways, Pleasure Garden is one Hitchcock movie I will admit that I have never seen. Not because it's hard to track down. I've never tried to find it, so I have no idea how hard it is to find. No, I haven't watched it because I don't think he would want me to. Anyway, the second one seems a bit more fun, but it's been lost for nearly 100 years, so I don't think we'll get a crack at that one anytime soon. His work for Amelka put him in touch with some of the expressionists he had admired from back home. F.W. Murnau, who was most known for his silent Dracula adaptation Nosferatu, planted the seed in Hitchcock's head that film is a medium of images and not so much words. Which is kind of ironic because a few years later he would go to a lot of effort to have recording equipment brought in overseas from the States so he could make the first talkie over there in England. Anyway, a few years prior to that though, he made his first hit in 1927, and he followed that up with a string of hits throughout the 30s until in 1940 he moved to Hollywood and made a picture with David O. Selznick producing. O. Selznick was a big producer. He had done movies like King Kong and Gone with the Wind. So clearly Hitchcock was already well respected by the time he came to the States. And actually that movie that they made got the Oscar for Best Picture that year. And by the mid-40s his movies were so popular that the studios were putting his name in front of the title to advertise it. So everybody knew this isn't just some movie, this is an Alfred Hitchcock fucking masterpiece. So yes, by the time he made Psycho, he was well over 40 movies. He had done over 40 movies, and 4 of those had earned him a nomination for Best Director from the Academy. He had a TV show that had been airing for 5 years by the time Psycho was released. If Elvis Presley was the king of rock and roll, then Alfred Hitchcock was the king of motion pictures. And, no doubts about that. I don't know if they really used the word branding like we do now, but by 1960, Alfred Hitchcock was very much his own brand. He had the clout to pretty much do whatever he asked for. They'd give him money, they'd give him whatever stars he wanted to work with, whatever screenwriter. North by Northwest starred Cary Grant and had a budget of over $3 million, and that was the thing he did right before Psycho. And he started wondering what he could do with far less money and star power. He had an agent secure the rights to Robert Bloch's novel, and he did this anonymously. And he would do all he could to keep his next production a secret. In fact, before production had even begun, he had his assistant buy up all the copies of Psycho, the novel, that she could find. He couldn't have that pesky book on the shelves, potentially spoiling the ending of his movie. He took his secrecy even further than that, filming under the alternate title in order to keep the suits at Universal from letting the cat out of the bag. He didn't want them to know too much, because if they started talking, then everybody would know. On the first day of filming, Hitchcock gathered the entire cast and crew and made them raise their right hand and swear an oath of secrecy, punishable by death. When shooting had been completed and it was time to promote the movie, Hitchcock wouldn't allow any interviews with its stars Janet Leigh and Anthony Perkins. None of the trailers for Psycho contain any elements of the film, and one of those is over 6 minutes long and consists of the director giving a tour of the set, giving kind of subtle hints that something unsettling had occurred there. This method of advertising was as unheard of then as it is now, but Hitchcock was such a character, truly larger than life, that he could get away with a kind of a wacky campaign like this. He understood and appreciated his role in pop culture, and he would exploit it every chance he got. But if a 6-minute trailer that stars the film's director is pushing the line, then what he did for the release is a giant leap over it, for sure. William Castle was a filmmaker, a little younger than Hitchcock. He had been making movies since the mid-40s. In the late 50s, he started using gimmicks to entice moviegoers. For House on Haunted Hill, a giant glow-in-the-dark skeleton would show up in the auditorium. For another movie, Castle had joy buzzers attached to the bottom of theater seats, and they would buzz in relation to some shit that Vincent Price said, which sounds kind of sexy, but I promise you, it isn't. Now, I have no idea what Alfred Hitchcock felt about the films of William Castle. If I were to guess, I would say that he likely thought of them as poppycock. But I'm not here to put words in anybody's mouth. And anyway, however Hitchcock felt about Castle's movies is insignificant. It was the gimmicks that got his attention. Because unlike some of the movies that they represented, the gimmicks actually worked. In particular, he liked the first gimmick Castle had used on a movie called Macabre, where they had moviegoers sign a legitimate life insurance policy for $1,000 should they die of fright while watching the movie. If he wasn't going to say anything about the movie and its promotion, he felt he needed a little something extra to give people something to talk about. He needed a gimmick. He decided that keeping the whole thing a secret was the gimmick. Okay, so you need a little context to grasp this next stunt. So I'm going to lay a little bit out for you. Okay, so back in this era, and for the 60 years of cinema prior to this, moviegoers would just show up for the movie whenever the fuck they felt like it. They might even meander in halfway through, or even at the end. Watch the tail end of a movie, then sit and wait for the next showing. I get a little twinge of anxiety just thinking about it myself. Hitchcock knew that if anyone saw the end of Psycho before the beginning, that the entire experience would be ruined and all of its shocking secrets would be told. So he created some rules. Well, one rule, but it was a big one, and it made theater managers very uneasy. Nobody would be admitted into the theater after the movie had started. I can completely understand why this would alarm theater owners. They were afraid that imposing these draconian stipulations on when people could enter a movie, that they would probably walk away and not go in, so they wouldn't get the money, plus they'd piss people off, so now they're angry. Not a good combo. Hitchcock suggested that these theaters hire security guards to stand outside and explain the policy to customers, and at least one theater employed a Pinkerton to help the theaters out. Yeah, a fucking Pinkerton. Standees with the director's likeness were propped in lobbies, which stated, "The manager of this theater has been instructed, at the risk of his life, not to admit to the theaters any persons after the picture starts. Any spurious attempts to enter by the side doors, fire escapes, or ventilation shafts will be met by force." Hitchcock was even cut a record that would be played in the theater before the movie, so every few minutes his voice could be heard. 1 minute to Psycho time, ladies. So now, out of great respect for the man, I will not divulge any of this movie's secrets. I'm aware that we are all familiar with the name Norman Bates by now, and I'm aware that most of you have likely seen this movie by now. Even if this is your first time viewing, you know what's coming. As fans of horror, both real and imagined, Psycho is part of all of us. And if it sounds like I'm being melodramatic, I want you to ask yourself one question. Have you ever done this? Look at you. Shit, you probably did it on your way to the kitchen during the last commercial break. Like it or not, Norman Bates is in your blood. It's okay, it's alright, because we all go a little mad sometimes. Alright, here you go. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Psycho time.
Please find your seats quickly. We don't have all day.